Hi, it's Kirby Summers for the Epstein Project podcast. Today is Sunday, crazy, August the 10th. Um, and before I get started, please like the video so I don't have to remind myself to ask you to do this later. Uh, Really, some interesting developments, I'm going to call them. My book, Ghislaine Maxwell, An Unauthorized Biography, was removed from Amazon. So I'm going to say bravo. That means that the other side does not want you to read what's on, I guess, what's in those pages or what's in that book or the names that I named from Ghislaine's younger days. The book is available via my website, kirbysummers.com. Amazon has given me some kind of indication that they plan to pull all of my books. They're citing that I've used the wrong keywords. Well, I took screen images of all the keywords, and the keywords are just normal keywords. There's nothing, I'm not uh, duplicating the title of another person's book or anything that's is supposed to be a no-no. I've obeyed all of their rules, and it's been a very good selling book. My books sell every day, and they have information on, the nefarious characters connected to the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell trafficking case, and which, look, let's just be real. This case connects to other cases. And so, I'm completely convinced at this point, uh, really completely convinced that Danny Casolaro's octopus, that one arm of that octopus is the blackmail and trafficking of minors and the MK Ultra program under which these minors, as in Paul Bonacci, who testified during his civil lawsuit against the man who was sort of ran the child trafficking ring, which he won, by the way. In his deposition, he basically explained that he had been trained from the age of 3 at a military base in San Francisco to become a sex slave, and that it was part of the MK Ultra program. He named his, with a lot of he did not want to name the person who was responsible or who headed, who was basically the head of his this MK Ultra unit. But when he did name him, it turned out to be the brother-in-law. I've named him in the books and I've named him on Twitter, but I'm not going to name him right now. But he is the brother-in-law of my abuser. So basically, he would be the son-in-law of Mishullam Rickless. So these characters appear and reappear in almost all of these crimes. I don't know why it has not occurred to anyone that the MK Ultra program, specifically the subset that was called the Lolita program, run by Stanley Gottlieb, and which was outed by Seymour Hersh, who award-winning investigative journalist. He won an award for the exposing the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. Later on, he exposed the Olson murder. Frank Olson was a scientist for the CIA, and he comes to New York with a couple of CIA guys, and they stay at a hotel that is now owned by Vornado. But before it was called, when he was thrown out, it was of the 10th floor window because he didn't jump out. He was thrown out. It was called the Hotel Statler. It's in New York. It's on 34th Street, sort of where Penn Station is. And it has changed names several times. And that's what they do, when there's, so for example, the hotel, just to sort of stay on this thing for a minute, the hotel where Danny Casolaro stayed in when he went to West Virginia to meet with his source, who was going to give him what he considered the last piece of the puzzle that would help Casolaro finish his investigation. The name of the hotel has changed. So pretty much whenever there's a crime, or they want to just alter the landscape so that things become hard to find, let's say now that we live in the age of the internet and you use search engines, well, they just change the name of the place. When I was doing some research recently into Leslie Wexner's life, I discovered that the homes where his family members used to live before he became a billionaire, and by the way, he wasn't self-made, but that's a story for another day, and it's in my new book, Creating Epstein, Bill Barr, Leslie Wexner, and the CIA. You can pre-order it on my website, kirbysummers.com. The houses where his family members lived are gone. Not only are they gone, but the streets have changed. And this happens. In fact, what's interesting is that I believe yesterday discovered that there are these two young guys there. They have a YouTube channel. And I was watching one of their videos on Danny Casolaro. And what they did was they went back to the hotel in Virginia. They booked the same room where Casolaro was found dead. Obviously, they said that he died of suicide. I don't think any of us believe it was suicide. And they retraced his steps. Well, the Pizza Hut where he had gone is like, there's nothing there. And they tried to go to several places where Casolaro had sort of been to before he was murdered. And these places were all gone. So, it does sort of, it's almost like it's part of a pattern that I have noticed, when I've been tracing certain things. And as you all know, all of the Epstein properties have been sold or are in the process of being sold. The same thing is happening with Ghislaine Maxwell's properties. And eventually, and being torn down. The house in Florida is being torn down. So I am of the opinion that it is the MK Ultra aspect of this that Danny Casolaro was in search of. I want to just see if I can find. I'm always with notes, right? So that Danny was convinced that the parts of the what he called the octopus, that there was a part that was sort of about the BCCI banking thing, which if you do some, I think a lot of you are already aware of the BCCI thing. BCCI ended up being connected to the Central Intelligence Agency, so that he had sort of stumbled upon that. And then, of course, he stumbled upon the allegations that Ronald Reagan had sent some people to Iran in order to where $40 million was paid so that the hostages would not be released, so that he would not lose the election to his opponent. And sure enough, when he was elected president, the hostages were released on the same day. So it sort of seems like that may very well have been the case. And of course, the other aspect that he was working on, in fact, on the day that he was found, well, he wasn't found on the day he died, but he was found I believe the next day, by the maids, was the promised software. So Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell is the person who worked with Rafi Eitan, one of Israel's super spies. He died not too long ago, and who went to California. I think it's California. He went to the Sandia laboratories, where the place had already been cased out, and Rafi Eitan basically wanted Robert Maxwell to sell them a compromised version of the promised software, which he did. Now, the scientists at Sandia Laboratories were somewhat kind of like not fully convinced that this Robert Maxwell, this fast talking, very flamboyant, very overweight guy, who traveled with a secretary, beautiful blonde secretary, and was dropping names left and right. They weren't convinced that he was on the up and up. And so they contacted the FBI. The FBI opened a file, and just as quickly as they opened it up, it was shut down. In fact, it was San Francisco. He had at the time a front in San Francisco, which was pretty much being looked after by his daughter, Isabel Maxwell. I think a lot of you may already be familiar with that story, but I think it's worth remembering that it was Robert Maxwell who was involved with the sale of the promised software, and that it was connected to Danny Casolaro's research, which I believe connects to the Jeffrey Epstein case. I'm going to see if so. The story of Danny has been told and told and told, but it's sort of like there are certain details that I think most people forget, or maybe people don't find. And I think I have it here somewhere. Bear with me. Because the information I want to find is on Michael Riconciuto. So here's the thing. Michael Riconciuto was a 16-year-old genius. He was in many ways like Jeffrey Epstein. And he was working for the CIA and sort of in their psychedelic lab. When he testified on behalf of Bill and Nancy Hamilton, who own Inslaw, which owned the original Promise software that was untampered with, and then the government basically stole it from them, breached a contract, got rid of the judge who decided in their favor, and then the lawsuit was sort of overturned because, of course, it's the government. They're not going to out themselves. And they had Michael Riconciuto, who was really the guy who put the back door into the Promise software. But what he was also doing, and in fact, after he went to bat for the Hamiltons, he was arrested and thrown into jail for many, many, many years. And then he was released, and then he was thrown into jail again. Um, and they got him on a drug bust, right? And basically, that's what they do with if you become a whistleblower, you're going to be thrown in jail. However, it's worth remembering that he used to be in the lab making LSD for the CIA to be used for these to set people up with minors. In fact, there is a I may have to add this somewhere, but there is a story that Michael Riconciuto discussed early on, that yeah, they were able to get some important person who was having inappropriate relationships with a minor, apparently, who had been drugged. They had been able to take to film him, and had blackmail material, so that this information is not more widely known. It surprises me, because there's so many people who have been poking around Danny Casolaro's death. And he died, by the way, on August 10th, 1991. And if that date rings a bell, it's because Jeffrey Epstein on August 10th, 2019, also died on the same day. It's my opinion that neither one committed suicide, although both deaths were declared a suicide. And again, I'm going to go back and say that these two deaths are connected. And what the government does at times, specifically in the espionage world, is they use signals, something that maybe for you and for me that would not mean anything. But I was always interested in the fact it just beckoned me to look at things a little bit closer. That this August 10th date, that there was just something there. So to me, it meant that it was not a random day, that it was selected for Jeffrey Epstein, maybe as a reminder. But for me, it basically cemented the fact that Danny Casolaro's Octopus was connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I do have information that Epstein had been able to get from Robert Maxwell a copy of the Promise software. But also, I have been able to sort of piece together that the government was keeping track of the child sex slaves through the MK Ultra program that was called the Lolita program. And then I think the names have been changed. It was later called the Monarch program, but it was several of these trafficking rings. So we know about the Franklin child abuse case, which, by the way, the court decided to label a hoax. So if you were to look for it, Wikipedia will tell you, oh, this was a hoax, except that it wasn't, right? I mean, Alicia Owen, one of the child victims, was 15 years old and impregnated by the chief of police who was connected to the ring. She had her kid, and kid's all grown now and looks just like the former chief of police who ended up elsewhere. So, and Paul Bonacci swore under oath, and so we know that that was a real case. But the government decided to say it was a hoax. And then, of course, we know just based on the recent court case of Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, what kind of court case was it? For me, I watched it, and I took copious notes, and I have written about it in my Epstein Project newsletter, which I'm like thrilled that I'm on my third year. Almost everyone is becoming a member because that's really where I do my deep dives. I can't say too much on video for obvious reasons, right? I mean, then my channel will probably disappear like my book just did from Amazon. Um, and there's not much I can really say on Twitter. So my research, and I'm always researching, I research every day and I have for years, because of my own experience with the Rickless family and what's happened with me for decades, which is again connected to this and connected to the Franklin scandal. It's just connected to all of the nefarious stuff that our government has done and continues to do. Various governments, it's not just one. Um, I put it into my Epstein Project newsletter. I send it out. It goes directly into my subscriber, paid subscriber inbox. And I ask people not to discuss what I share with them on social media. And no one has ever breached my confidence to date. So that's kind of the way I do it in order to continue to get the news out. So if you haven't become a member, you might want to consider it. You just go to my website, kirbysummers.com, and look to subscribe. It helps me stay on this case, and it helps the people who read it. So I mean, I've gotten such great feedback because it goes where mainstream media obviously is not never going to go. And it explains the things that most people sort of like, there's just this, so many kind of like missing pieces when you're only dealing with what mainstream media puts out. So clearly I go much deeper to the point where I really believe that the missing piece in Danny Casolaro's Octopus is the MK Ultra program. In 1974, Seymour Hersh was handed internal documents, sort of like this dossier of over 600 pages. And it was about the illegal activities being done by the CIA, which included the MK Ultra program. He wrote about it in the New York Times. He got a couple of stories in there. It outraged the public to hear, oh my God, people that are not being told that they're going to be given drugs like LSD, hallucinating drugs, and that they're being experimented on. And sure enough, this was happening in universities, it was happening in jails, it was happening if you went to the bar and somebody lured you with the promise of, let's go have a good time. There were these safe houses in San Francisco and in New York where, people were being filmed and they were being drugged, and no one knew what was happening to these people afterwards. There was just no concern. It was being done to children. It was being done to adults. There are some famous cases that we have come to be aware of. However, just to get back to my point, I suspect strongly that it is the MK Ultra program that was the last piece of Danny's Octopus. The two young guys who decided to go to West Virginia, where Danny was murdered, to the hotel, and they stayed in there. They discovered that one of the detectives who appeared when he died, Casolaro died in 1991, is the police chief. And so, we have also seen a pattern of people being given a higher position, people rising up the ladder. If you cooperate, you rise up the ladder. Look what happened with Alexander Acosta. He was the attorney for the Southern District of Florida, and he gave Jeffrey Epstein a non-prosecution agreement that basically uh, said that the federal government would not be prosecuting either him or any of his named or unnamed co-conspirators. Imagine, I mean, like in perpetuity. And, Donald Trump made him the 27th Secretary of Labor for the United States. It's a position that he stepped down from only after Jeffrey Epstein's second arrest in July of 2019. And that's really when the public became aware again of what Acosta had done. And Acosta, instead of taking the heat, he resigned. But he did say during his when he was nominated in 2017 by Donald Trump for that position, he was questioned about why he was so lenient with Jeffrey Epstein when the case initially came to his attention in 2005, 2006, 2007, to which he replied, I was told to back off, that he, meaning Epstein, was above my pay grade, that he belonged to intelligence. So again, Epstein is an intelligence asset. I believe he was working along with Robert Maxwell's daughter, a child trafficking ring for the purpose of blackmail. Okay, so you can't run a government without blackmail, and it connects to what Danny Casolaro was looking at. So I'd love to hear your comments on this podcast. It's sort of an impromptu conversation I wanted to have with you because I had a couple of thoughts going through my mind as I'm wrapping up my latest book, Creating Epstein, Bill Barr, Leslie Wexner, and the CIA. And I'm working on the last chapter, and I am going to sort of include Danny Casolaro's name because I think it's important for us not to lose sight of what he was working on in 1991, 40 years ago, 41 years ago, when he died. Is it 41? 31. Okay, 31. That's a long time. And that, like 3 decades later, we're still trying to independently. I mean, I'm not working for mainstream media. I don't have a 401k. I don't have a salary. I'm not going to an office where I have a research assistant. I'm doing this on my own. It's citizen journalism. Many of you are also doing this on your own, citizen journalism. So I guess it's just up to us. But don't forget Danny, who was one of the first citizen journalists, and what he was trying to piece together and what I've pieced together. All right. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Please like the video and have a good Sunday. All righty. Bye.